By the 19th century, Britain had developed into an industrial titan, bursting with wealth. Its monumental success came from a period of staggering technological invention that swept across the empire and then dominated the globe.
It's hard to think of a period in history where you had so much creativity in terms of technology, so much willing to experiment with the possibilities of what you can do with machines, what you can do with engineering, what you can do with architecture.
In the past, empires had been built by hand. Now the British would dominate their territory with machines.
Engineering innovations like cast iron and the turning of a warship into a single ballistic offensive entity with guns transformed the English Navy. And that Navy transformed England into an empire. And that military and commercial empire that spread from Europe to Asia, from the Americas to Africa, dominated the seas. But what about the land? Because by the early 1800s, Britain was jumping with productivity, but lacking in means of overland distribution. Well, in 1782, a man named James Watt perfected an engine driven by steam. But it was 40 years later that George Stephenson and his son Robert took that engine and with a firebox, boiler, piston, and a remarkable invention called the chimney, powered a locomotive called the rocket over tracks at the blistering speed of 29 miles an hour and revolutionized overland commercial transportation with the railroad.
The rocket was not the first locomotive, but its unique engineering features proved that steam trains were the force of the future. The key to its speed was in its engine. A series of copper pipes carried hot gases from a coal-fueled firebox through a chamber of water, bringing it to a boil. This created steam that rose up into a dome and was forced through a valve into a cylinder. The intense pressure from the steam pushed a piston rod that connected to the wheels of the locomotive, powering it forward. By venting the exhaust steam out of a chimney instead of the cylinder, fresh air was sucked into the firebox, stoking the fire. With this advance, the rocket could charge ahead at blazing speeds.
Of all the locomotives that were imagined at the time, it's the one that looks the most like a locomotive will. I mean, it's going to be improved in innumerable ways, but that basic machine is the one that emerges as a locomotive for the next century.
The race was on to build railroads across Britain. And in 1833, a brilliant and brash engineer rose to prominence when he entered the railroad game. His name was Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
Brunel was a real showman. He dressed well, he had a beautiful wife. He was a celebrity, and he knew how to play that to a hilt. He was also a workaholic. He had a very difficult time delegating.
Brunel had a bold vision for his railway. It would be the most ambitious project to date, a massive network of railroads connecting all of England together. He called it the Great Western Railway, and he was determined to make it the fastest line ever created.
He wanted a track which was on a very, very shallow gradient so that the trains would be able to travel that much faster.
The need for speed meant going through mountains rather than over them, and this led to his greatest engineering marvel. Today, it is known as the Box Tunnel.
It was necessary, essentially, to chisel through rock, and the length of the tunnel was something like 1 3/4 miles, which was really astonishing for this time. That's a really serious tunnel, even by today's standards.
Brunel amassed hundreds of Irish workers called navvies to dig the tunnel. They began by sinking a series of shafts from the top of the hill. Gunpowder was used to blast through the rock. Then the navvies were lowered in baskets down the shaft, where they excavated the materials with basic hand tools. Horses turned winches that pulled the material to the top of the hill.
It was a slow painful and sometimes quite a dangerous process, of course. And there were fatalities on the box tunnel during its construction. Lots of dust, lots of grime, and when the explosions were going off, the risk of flying rock.
After 4 years of work that claimed more than 100 lives, the box tunnel was finished. The Great Western Railway finally opened in 1841. Trains still run through the box tunnel to this day. The railway mania that Brunel helped ignite eventually spread to the rest of the empire, tightening England's stranglehold on power around the world.
Railways in the middle of the 19th century, first in England and then wherever they spread, they're sources of just incredible wonder. They're big, they're loud, they're dirty, and they're just power. And they represent speed, they represent the conquest of space and time. They're literally awesome machines.
With the runaway success of the railway, Britain was now decades ahead of the rest of the world in modern engineering technology. Their empire was fast approaching its apex. But a staggering blow to its nerve center would rattle the empire to its very foundations. The first person to be killed by a train was a member of Parliament. He was struck by the rocket in 1830.